questions that are there at the time. All right, so we'll go ahead and get going here and begin with some introductions. So I'll turn it over first to Linda Kovacs, and then we'll meet the team and get underway with some topics.
Hi, I'm Linda Kovacs. I work with students whose last names begin with the letters A through G-I-N.
Hi, I'm Jacqueline Devlin, and I work with students whose last name is G-I-O through O-M.
Great. I'm Julie Blake, and I work with students whose last names begin with O-N through the end of the alphabet.
Wonderful. Thank you, guys. Your 2022 juniors are in excellent hands, and the three counselors work incredibly hard. And we've got a busy 18 months ahead of us as we approach this process. So for those of you that I don't know or have not had a chance to meet, I'm Jen Nectarline. I'm the college and career counselor at Hunterdon Central. And I have to tell you, in my 13 years at Central, I've been so lucky to do the vast majority of our college and career evening programs, and my comfort zone is absolutely in the auditorium standing at a podium. I have learned through this year in turning all of our programs to virtual webinars that I think it's just the technology that makes me a little apprehensive and hoping that everything works. But I approached this last year with the mindset and the mission to not really change anything we do as far as timeline, content. It's our goal and our hope to still deliver everything to you when we normally would. So the good news is mid-January is when we would normally kick off college and career planning for our juniors. And we normally would be standing in the auditorium with you tonight and presenting this information. So normally I love seeing a show of hands and how many of you have been through this process, how many of you are going through it, a couple times, how many of you have attended one of our programs before. I can't do that tonight, but chances are if you have a junior, perhaps over the last 2 years, 9th and 10th grade, oh, I see a couple hands raised there. Thanks, guys. In 9th or 10th grade, you came out to our early college planning night. So you did get a chance to see us in the auditorium and doing our thing there. I kind of like to refer to 11th grade college planning night as a continuation of our early college planning program. The 9th and 10th grade years are great years to get a foundation going for early college planning and really just get your wheels turning and thinking about what you might want to do after high school. But now we're in it, we're really in it, and it's time to get planning. I think that it's safe to say there's probably juniors who've been thinking about this process and know what they want their years after Hunterdon Central to look like. And there's some that are just starting fresh, or there's some that still don't know. Whatever the case is, we are here to help. So I'll preface all the content we're sharing tonight with this. This is our evening program. We're kind of bulking everything into this one sort of 90-minute program. You can rewatch later, but we're kind of skimming the surface. I mean, I could probably spend 30 to 60 minutes talking just about college visits and how to make the most of a visit and how visits have been impacted by COVID. But what we're actually doing is taking every piece of content from tonight and turning it into its own video. 5 minutes, 6 minutes, 7 minutes. I've been recording those. Those are actually going to come out to our juniors next week. And it's going to be, if you have questions about standardized testing, click this video. If you have questions about visits, click this video, or how to make a college list, click this video. It's going to be kind of in a video library, and we'll place all those links and videos in a Google Doc. We'll make sure it gets out to students, to parents on our website. So just know that everything we're talking about tonight is going to go out in a lot more detail over the coming weeks. So let me begin with just a little bit of background. Interesting year, needless to say, in college admissions. Like everything in the universe, college admissions had tremendous impact from the pandemic that we are still living through. So I think it's important to provide historical context. I think it's important for juniors to know how students prior to them have fared in the college process. And I'll be keeping you updated on how this year's senior class does. But all in all, we didn't see a whole lot of tremendous change as far as what happens with our seniors. We graduated over 700 students in the class of 2020. And on average, they pretty much went in the same paths normally they would. So about 70% of our students went off to four-year college. Another 20% matriculated to community college, and somewhere around 10% pursued something else. And for our students, oftentimes that's enlisting in the military, going right into the workforce, trade school, technical school, taking a year off, kind of figuring things out. What we did see in trending with the class of 2020 was there was some change, obviously, through the summer. Living here in the community, between, being around and bumping into students, I heard about a lot of students changing their minds of going further away to staying closer. So there was a lot of that changing of where I'm going to deposit, where I'm going to end up going. And so we saw that. We saw students in the spring, as college decisions came in and they were processing those decisions at home or through virtual Zooms, decide to stay local. And so that was pretty much the biggest change we saw, but we really didn't see anything shift too much in the number of students who pursue college after Hunterdon Central. So college matriculations, a little more local, a little more regional versus going further away. Trends stayed about the same, but we saw some increases in students attending our state schools and schools within a drivable distance, if you will. But overall, in general, I mean, we've seen some impact on this admissions process, and I'm going to touch on some of those areas tonight. Definitely with testing, standardized testing, that's probably the biggest, with just about every college and university under the sun moving to a test optional practice, and I'll talk more about that. Obviously, our students couldn't make visits in the spring. We saw that kind of fluctuate through the summer. We saw students start to be able to get on campuses even into the fall, but it was tough, and it's remained tough for our current seniors who sort of lost that spring of junior year process as far as going on campus visits. I mean, everything was shut down. I hope the spring for you all as juniors is a little bit different, and we have those opportunities to make campus visits April, May, and June. We saw interruptions in activities, and that created some stress and anxiety among our students, thinking, wow, this is stuff that was really supposed to be a highlight of my application, and now I can't do it. So trust me, in that colleges understand they were impacted. I mean, the impact has spread across the process quite a bit, but I'm proud of our team at Central and how we've stayed on top of it and how we've continued to deliver our college and career counseling curriculum in the best way possible. A couple of things got delayed here and there as far as, some of our extra programs we do, but we came back ready to go in September. As you know, we've been a hybrid model all year, and we came back ready to go, and our seniors have filed applications. They're doing really well. I want to speak to that for a moment because I know I'll have juniors saying, hey, how are the seniors doing? They're doing good. I mean, we haven't received any tremendous admission surprises. We have students who are sitting on a couple acceptances, and we have a lot of seniors who are going to receive more this coming March. But what I will say is when I meet with juniors, which I'm already underway doing, and they say to me, Mrs. Nepterline, what are my chances at this, this, and this? And normally pre-COVID, it was really comfortable for me to say, I think this is a target, or I think this is a probable, or this is a reach. I'm kind of waiting it out, guys. I'm waiting it out to see how these next couple of months go, to see how things really do end up come May and June with our current seniors, and really see if this massive test optional movement has changed the selectivity at schools where we do a lot of volume. So stay tuned, know that we're on top of it, we're on top of trend, and we're going to deliver all of that information to you. So that's my 2020 year in review. So let's go over a couple of goals that we keep. I kept this slide pretty much the same. I didn't change a whole lot as far as last year's programs, because we don't want to really alter our process or do anything crazy and different. What I will say is I'll preface this slide with every junior's different. Every junior's on an individual path. That path is your own. So when you look at this slide and go, these are my goals for this year, how am I going to do all this? It's individual. You might meet some of these might take you a little bit longer. You might look at this list and go, check, check, check. I've got most of this done. Just remember, you're all in a different place. But let me break down what I mean by goals for junior year. And what I mean is, if you can just sort of put a small check beside some of these, like you're sort of working on them between now and June, you're in good shape. You're in good shape going into your summer. You're in good shape coming into senior year. So we want you to research colleges. Now, researching colleges can be formal, like you're on the internet and saving web pages and making notes, to you're just hanging out on your phone, juniors, and just searching for schools and checking out different things on websites. Anything works. We're fine with any of that. We just want you to invest some time in getting to know the schools that are of interest. That's all, just researching some schools. If you want to get fancy, start making spreadsheets and lists and things like that, that works too. But just keep your research going, get to know schools, get to know changes at schools, things like that, okay? We'd like you to think about your list. And again, it can be formal, it can be a Google spreadsheet, something very organized, or it's just hanging out in your head. That works too. But we want you to develop that list. We want you to work with your counselor or myself to develop your list. And I'm going to take each of these bullets and break them down in a little bit more. So we'll talk more about college lists, but we want you to really think about developing a good, healthy college list. We'd love for you to put a little bit of time into studying majors and studying different career paths. Maybe jump back into Naviance and take one of those aptitude tests to really understand what's out there. Have conversations with your counselor, with me. We want to talk to you about realizing there's more than 10 majors out there, folks. Okay, it's not all, STEM and healthcare and business. There is so much out there, and we want you to find majors that are good fits and prepare yourself for several different career paths. So spend a little bit of time in there. I've got a slide on that and some resources. We want you to think about your testing plan. Again, something that's probably crossed your mind casually or informally, but we really want you to take some time and think about, are you going to test? When are you going to test? Can you safely test? And I'll talk a lot more about testing because we just had such impact over the last year on testing. Take some time this second half of junior year to evaluate your activities. I know you've had interruption. I know it's been tough to not be able to do the things, the clubs, some of the sports, perhaps that job you were supposed to have last summer, first part-time job, maybe it didn't work out or you couldn't do it. We get it. We know there's interruption. I'm going to turn over to one of our counselors later to talk about activities. Take a moment this second half of junior year and really evaluate how you're spending your time. Think ahead to summer, think ahead to fall of senior year and doing the things that are important to you and you're passionate about. So we'll talk more about activities. And then the last two, so let me stop there. Everything I've talked about so far are probably things you've heard about: college lists, researching schools, using Naviance, thinking about the SAT or ACT, staying involved. Nothing terribly new, okay? So hopefully when I say the words, keep doing what you're doing, that resonates with you. But now we've got some new things coming up for juniors, and these are really doable, folks, okay? Before the end of junior year, we're gonna ask you to request teacher letters of recommendation. We've got a whole slide on this. Big part of the second half of junior year, we'll tell you how to request, who to ask, all those things. But this is going to be an important component of your college applications and something we're going to ask you to take care of over the next 6 months. And then there'll be some important forms that you have to fill out that help your counselor in writing that letter of recommendation. So those last two bullets are kind of goals, but sort of tasks too. So stay tuned. We will talk about them. But folks, look at the screen. If you can look at this and go, all right, I think I can kind of work on some of this, you're in good shape. You're not behind. And if you're looking at this going, whoa, I haven't started any of this yet, well, we're here and you're fine. You're not behind. You're all in a good place just by being here tonight. So thanks for coming out. So there's a couple goals we have for this year. All right. Really shifting gears now. You probably are looking at the title of the slide going, where did this come from? Why is she talking about decisions? I think it's a really important piece to include in our presentation. I include it in all of our presentations, even with our seniors, before we get into all of this, because I want to preface when I talk about college admissions with an understanding of what I know and what I've learned over 16 years in college counseling about how decisions are made. I think sometimes teens enter this process with what they've heard in the media, what they've read in print, just what they hear, but don't realize that there's actually a lot more that goes into a decision besides just what the assumption is grades or my GPA. We tend to see students get a little hung up on that GPA, that number. So let me break down holistic review. If you're a family listening tonight, and you have listened to a virtual information session or actually have been on a college campus and heard admissions people talk about admissions and reviewing applicants, you might have heard the term holistic review. And that means whole child, whole applicant. We look at everything. And that is pretty much what most schools do, is give a holistic review. So when you look at this bulleted list of things that schools are looking at, I start with transcript, okay? Transcript is the first thing that schools look at. We have to be realistic. It's your academic performance. Students, juniors, if you haven't seen your actual transcript before, talk to your counselor about it. You can go in Aspen, you could look at sort of a summary of it, but the actual document that we send to colleges looks a little bit different. It's got your basic info on it, where you live and all of that. And then it has your 9th grade, 10th grade, and 11th grade courses and final grades. Remember, this transcript's going out next fall. So 9th, 10th, 11th grade completed with final grades. Don't worry about how you're doing, the mid-year grade or any of that. It's final grades and a cumulative GPA, unweighted for everybody and weighted if you are taking any weighted classes like honors and AP. That's your transcript. There's another key component that colleges are going to see on your transcript, and that is all the courses you've registered for senior year. They're on your transcript listed as in progress. So it's a picture of you academically, and it's an important picture. It's black and white. There's no gray to it. It is what you see is what you get. So they do look at the GPA. Colleges look at it, of course they do. But when you really step back and think about the work and the tasks that colleges are faced with, in that they've got to review transcripts that look terribly different and have crazy different GPA scales from all over the country and the globe, you have to think and step back and go, is that GPA really that important? Sure, we're a traditional 4.0 high school, 4.0 GPA scale with weight. So there's going to be some folks that have GPAs over a 4.0 if they've taken weighted classes. But when it really comes down to it, the GPA is just a number. It is a calculated number based on a scale. So a 4.0 student, or excuse me, a 3.7 student at Hunterdon Central would never be compared to a 3.7 student at a high school in Delaware, because that's two totally different 3.7s. So colleges, again, they look at the GPA. Some of them may recalculate it and do different things. Some colleges may remove the weight. Yes, folks, that happens. What they're focused on so much more is everything else in the transcript. The courses you've selected in the context of our high school, the trends. So in 9th grade, did you start a little rocky? Did you kind of move your way up? Was there a dip? Okay, let's jump over to the essays and letters of rec and see if that dip in grades was explained anywhere. So they're really studying the transcript. So juniors, especially students on tonight, listen when I tell you, it is not all about your GPA. And you've got to take that GPA and just sort of push it off for a second and think, okay, what am I doing to get there? Okay, holistic review. So it's not just a GPA, it's the whole transcript. Okay, so we've got our transcript. Now we move on to scores. A lot of impact over the last year on scores. Standardized test scores, if required by a college for you folks next year, they're going to be considered. Right now, it's January 2021. Our current seniors, they were pretty good shape. The vast majority of our seniors had a 90% list test optional. There's a state way down in the southern part of the country, it's Florida, where all of their public universities happen to not go test optional, a statewide movement. And so our kids applying to places, like UF, University of Florida, they had to submit scores. But I'll tell you folks, working with our seniors over the last 5 months, the vast majority of them had a true option. Do I have to submit scores or not? And it's been a wild 10 or 11 months. And the result of all that, of course, was that so many of those tests didn't occur through spring and summer. But if your scores, if these colleges don't keep a test optional, they go back to requiring scores. So the class of 22, you may have to submit them. So I'll talk about that more, but yes, if it's required, it's going to be part of the review. Now, after transcript and grades, and a college is making a decision, we move into the stuff I call soft factors, the stuff that's not black and white, the stuff that can sort of be molded, the stuff we have a little bit more control over. Students, you have control over who you ask for letters of rec. You don't have control over what they say. I can tell you they're going to say beautiful things about you and your letters are going to be outstanding. Our teachers write beautiful letters for our students, but you have control over who you ask. And here we are at January of junior year with 6 more months to think about this, okay? So we'll talk a lot more about letters of rec, but if a college wants letters of rec, 1, 2, or 3, whatever the case is, counselor letter, teacher letters, that means they're reading them. That means those letters are contributing to your overall evaluation. Next bullet, we get into that piece that you have full control over, and that's your essay. We'll talk a little bit more about essays, but essays are a very important part of the process. In conversations I've had over the last several months with admission colleagues, as we've called and advocated for students, we've talked about essays. We've talked about essays being an important part because we're missing that thing called a test score. So I can't say they've taken over the process, but they're important. And we'll spend a lot of time thinking about essays. Some of you in your English classes will talk about essays. So definitely the place to share your story, definitely an important component of your application. Everything you do that's not on that transcript, So all your activities, your talents, how much commitment you put into those things are going to be considered. And we'll talk more about activities, but such important information that makes you whole, that creates that holistic review. And then my last two bullets, demonstration of interest, and my toolbar is actually hiding the last one. I think it's interview. Yes. Demonstration of interest and interviews. If the school calculates those two things, if the school, the college says, yeah, they're important to us. We want you to show us some love. We want you to show us some interest. We want you to sign up for things and we're going to track it and see how many times you do, then it counts. But it doesn't count everywhere. And schools tend to be pretty transparent in telling you whether or not interest matters. Some even put it on their website. And then interviews, you know, not every school interviews. It's tough to get your admissions staff out there or even on virtual platforms to do interviews. But if a school offers you one, we will help you. We'll help you prepare for one and help you put your best foot forward. So that is all in all, there's a lot that goes into an admission decision. So we're going to stop talking about GPAs being the end all be all or test scores, because we've learned in the last 10, 11 months that they are absolutely not that. But I want you all to realize, students and parents listening tonight, that there is so much that goes into an admission decision. The work cut out for admissions it's heavy work, and it happens a little different at every institution. You know, we've got really selective schools who we know are looking at things differently. We've got schools that are a little less selective. It's interesting over the years and sitting in some admission committees and watching how decisions are made. I hope seeing this slide gives you a little insight. There's a lot that goes into this. There's a lot to you, and we're prepared over the next year and a half to help make it look really good, really strong, and help you put your best foot forward. So that's what I've got on decisions. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and move now to, did I go too fast? No, I'm going to move to list. This is a really popular starting point for students. Oftentimes we have students say, you know, I don't know where to start, but I kind of have a list. Like, that's great. You got a couple schools in mind. Lists tend to begin with what you know. So it's where, you know, if your parents went to college, perhaps where, you know, where they went. If you have siblings who've been through this process, where they're at, that might be a starting point. Friends, neighbors, bumper stickers, who's playing on ESPN Saturday morning, whatever the case might be, your lists tend to start with just what you know is out there. Maybe you're going in the direction of grabbing a magazine that says something like US News and World Report. You could put those off to the side. They're all just rankings. Maybe you've got a book, maybe you're browsing the web, but likely your list is starting with some familiar schools. Now, don't be surprised if you meet with myself or your counselor and we give you a couple other names, a couple schools we think would be a great fit after getting to know you. We want to expand that list. We want to open your eyes to the thousands of options that are out there. What is a healthy college list? Well, it's got a couple probable schools, a couple targets, and a couple reaches. And I'll break those categories down. Your probables are what probably a lot of you listening know as a safety. I heard that word today in a meeting with a senior. I got into my safety and it was like, oh, we don't use that word. There's nothing safe in college admissions. It's an unknown process that's out of our control. There's probable, high probability of being admitted. And you can use things like Naviance, our college and career software, to help you determine your probability by looking at the average student who's been admitted from Central. And do you fall above that student? Okay, it's a good probable. We'll be honest with you. We'll tell you, yeah, that's a good probable. Students like you've been admitted. You've got a good chance of getting in there. Targets are right in the middle. I don't have a lot to say about targets. They're 50-50 chance. They match up with you really well based on overall academic performance and profile. You'll have a couple of those on your list. They're middle of the road. We don't know what's going to happen. It all kind of depends on the application year, how many of your classmates are applying. So you'll have a couple of schools there. And then we have the reaches. Reaches are your toughest schools, your most selective, your Ivies, your tier below that. But an Ivy is going to be a reach for everybody, but there's could be schools, you know, based on your student, that are going to be reaches for different students. So Rutgers might be a big reach for one student and a probable, obviously, for another. So it's your individual list. Make sure it's balanced and make sure it's representative of those three categories. You'll have to watch my video on college lists. I had a lot of fun making that one. I could talk about college lists for a long time. I get the question a lot, how many schools should I apply to? So in running reports at Central, I've been here 13 years. I will tell you our average has not changed a whole lot. I'll be very anxious to see how it looks after this year, because I felt like every senior I met with had a longer list than I've ever seen before because of all the uncertainty. People were just, they got a couple extra schools to their list, but I will say the average student tends to fall between 8 and 10 colleges. So 8 to 10, what that provides you is a couple schools in each category, 2, 3, maybe 4. Now, if you're sitting here thinking 8 to 10, how are we going to end up there? How are we going to pay all those application fees and all of that? Number one, we have answers to all of that. So don't worry about paying app fees. We can help with that. We can give you information on how to take care of that. If you have financial struggles, we're more than happy to pass that information along. But don't worry about having 6 right now or having 25 on your list that you're thinking about. We can sort of help students get to that point. But if you have 6 schools, 6 really good, solid options, and you've got a great chance of being admitted, then that's fine. We'll give you that feedback and advice. Like, this is great. Go for these 6. We've got really high hopes about 4 or 5 of these for you. If you're applying to 14 or 15 or 16, and that was not out of the norm with our seniors this year, it's a lot of work. There could be reasons for that. Super selective programs, you're applying to accelerated med programs or maybe nursing or something where you need to keep that list a little longer. That's perfectly fine too. So that's our thoughts on making a good, healthy, balanced list. Think about your criteria. Think about where you want to be, location, the size of school, the type of campus culture and community. Obviously, if you have a major in mind, you want to keep that in mind. Naviance is a great search tool. College Board is a great search tool. There's a ton of them out there, but if you can stick with those 2, you're going to get some really nice lists to work off of. But this is your time, juniors, to take a step back and go, what do I want? Where do I want to be? What kind of school do I want to be at? Do I want to be a number at a school with 40,000 students? Or do I want to go be a shining star somewhere and be on a campus that's maybe just a little bigger than my high school with 4,000 or 5,000 students in a small community? Or do you want something kind of in the middle? So we're going to ask you that. In fact, when I meet with students, that's one of my questions I ask when a student requests an appointment to meet with me. I send back a couple questions. I want to know that you've got some criteria in place so that we can best help you form that list. We want to make sure you're focusing on fit. Okay, so put those U.S. News and World Report aside, put all those rankings aside. They don't have much validity, actually any validity in the college process. Okay, so we're focusing on fit. So if a student reaches out to me and says, Mrs. Nectarline, can you send me the top 25 engineering programs in the country? I'm going to tell them, well, I'm guaranteeing you about 20 out of 25 of these are going to be reaches because they're the most selective schools in the country. And I don't want to find the rankings. I want to focus on the best engineering program for you. Where can you academically fit and be successful? What can your family afford? And you're not going to just go to class. You've got to live there, be part of this social community. So let's talk about what you do for fun. What are your hobbies? And I'll think back to schools that may resonate well with you, that may fit you. So that's what fit is. Academically, are you going to go there and be successful? A little challenged, that's okay. But we don't want you to sink. We don't want you to spend hours upon hours in your dorm or your apartment just trying to stay afloat with the academics because you just got in. We want you to go to a school that really fits you academically. So a little bit of healthy challenge, but an overall good, supportive academic community. Obviously, financial fit, that's going to be worked out by you and your family. Is the school affordable? Is it affordable with loans, or is it affordable without? You have to think about all of those factors. And then social fit, that's a tough one to research. Social fit doesn't really come to the surface until you're on campus and you're living there and you're living within this community. And those communities, folks, look different than they did a year ago. So keep that in mind. Social fit. And I, having been on 360 campuses, I can tell you that I've got a pretty good handle of the social fit on some campuses. And I keep in touch with, and a lot of our counselors do, with alumni who come back and tell us, hey, that party scene is crazy wild. It was not for me, or there's nothing to do on the weekend, and this is why I transferred. We're really candid with our students. Like we are very honest. We collect all that over the years, and we tell them, hey, that's a place where I think, you'd fit in really well. I think you're going to find your people and your vibe there, because the vibes are different everywhere, folks. So fit is really important. A couple search tools I mentioned, Naviance, College Board. But again, tonight, remember, we're just skimming the surface, but that's what we want to share with you on college lists. So I'm going to go ahead and move on. Majors and careers, I touched on a little bit earlier. If you're sitting here tonight and you're undecided, it's okay. A lot of our students go into college undecided. Some colleges have really fancy terms for that: interdisciplinary studies, exploratory studies, things like that. It's fine to go in undecided. But oftentimes I want to have a conversation with students who are thinking undecided, and, just bring up a couple majors that maybe you haven't heard of, that you didn't even know existed, just to open your eyes to what's out there. I find that our students kind of fall into like 10 or 15 programs. We get a lot of STEM at Hunterdon Central, so a lot of students interested in majoring in science, biology, chemistry, technology. So, comp sci majors, that's booming right now, computer science. We have a lot of engineering majors. The M in STEM, I don't have a ton of math majors, but statistics and math or data science are all really popular right now. So those are coming up. So we have a lot of STEM majors. We can certainly point you in the direction of schools that are strong there. A lot of healthcare, a lot of interest in nursing, eventually medicine, the allied health areas like physical therapy, occupational therapy, pharmacy. And then we move into a lot of business. We move into the sports arena: sports management, sports marketing, exercise science, athletic training. So we hear a lot of the same things over and over. And so we want to open your eyes to what's out there. Communications and all different areas of education. And there's just endless possibilities. Obviously, your smaller schools, smaller list of majors. Your bigger schools, your state universities, 100+ majors, so much to choose from. Naviance, College Board, Career Cruising, 3 fantastic sites. If you are feeling unacquainted with Naviance, it's been a couple years since you've been in there and really messed around with the program, don't be embarrassed. Reach out to your counselor or me. We'll get you reacquainted, especially if your password doesn't work, folks. Don't be embarrassed. We'll help you get logged back in. Career Cruising, you were introduced to probably in 9th or 10th grade. If you have never heard of it, we can get you on that. Great aptitude tests. And then College Board does a phenomenal job of profiling different majors and careers. So if you're on the College Board website, click the search bar, type in major and career profiles, and you're going to get some really fantastic information about like hundreds and hundreds of majors and careers. No worries if you're undecided though, but you can go in undecided, and you want to ask the question when you're researching schools: what do you do for undecided students? How are you going to help me find my path? How are you going to help me declare that major by sophomore year? So importantly, we've got a whole slide on scheduling. I'm going to turn that over to one of our grade level counselors. But as we approach scheduling in a couple weeks, juniors, think about your senior year. You probably have the most flexibility you've had. There's probably very little left that you absolutely have to take to graduate. This is the time to think about, a little bit of challenge, getting yourself ready for your college education, taking some courses that might align with what you want to study. Very important. And then lastly, if you can get some experience in relation to what you want to do, great. Now that bullet probably made a lot more sense a year ago. I know we've got limitations to jobs and shadowing and all of that, but some students are still able to work things out. And I'm not talking about fancy internships at, labs on university campuses. I'm talking about, if you want to major in education, are you babysitting? Are you a camp counselor? Those are great things. Are you interested in business? Are you working at a local retail shop or at a restaurant, learning how to manage money? Folks, we can help you promote those things on your application so schools know that you're getting some type of real life experience, okay? So it's optional, but if we can help align your high school curriculum, your activities with what you want to study, it's even better. So again, another great point to talk about with your counselor or myself. All right, let's shift over to testing. I kind of touched on this already. It's been a year. It has been a year for College Board and ACT. In a nutshell, last March, we were faced with canceled tests from March through summer. A couple tests got snuck in there in the summer. And then as we entered the fall of 2020, SAT, ACT, College Board and ACT, the 2 parent organizations, found themselves in a better spot to be able to run tests. This impact, I think, is going to, it's going to be around for a long time, this impact on admissions and standardized testing. And I can tell you, as someone who's invested in college planning and college counseling for 16 years, and it's what I live, eat, and breathe, if you can't tell already how excited I get about it. It's been so interesting to watch institutions go test optional that relied on that score, that relied on that piece of data as they did applicant review. Before March of 2020, there were absolutely colleges that were test optional. They decided, but it took them years to get there. You don't just wake up one day in admissions and say, we're not going to require test scores anymore. You go through your faculty, you go through your board of trustees, you do research. I mean, I've been on advisory boards at some colleges. This took them 3 to 5 years to figure out that they were no longer going to require scores. And we had schools doing this in the spring in a matter of weeks. So imagine being a selective institution, because trust me, they've all gone test optional, and deciding we are not going to require scores for the incoming class for the fall of 2020. They didn't really have a choice because those kids couldn't take tests. But now they're sitting on those applications. And there are absolutely students in the senior class who submitted test scores. They got a test in maybe before the pandemic, or they got a test in over the late summer or the fall as the test dates occur. But then there's quite a few that didn't, or didn't do the way they wanted because they took the test 3 hours from home because it's the only place they could get a seat. And the discomfort of that just created a really rough Saturday morning for them, and they didn't perform their best. So they didn't submit, and they had the option to not submit. So it's really going to be an interesting winter and spring for me as I kind of see how this all plays out and how the submission versus the non-submission of scores affects our applicants, if it does at all. And I'll be sharing all that as I meet with juniors. So here's the deal. Right now, what I'm watching and what I'd like you all to watch is your colleges of interest. Okay, so if you've got a school on your radar, I want you to watch what they're doing for the class of 22. Are they extending the test optional practice for another year? Did they already announce that? Did they announce it last spring that they were going to make it a 2-year or 3-year, or even better, an indefinite commitment? That's what you've got to keep an eye on. Okay. So I've got a website here, fairtest.org. Okay. So hopefully you can all see this. Fair Test has always been kind of the host of the test optional list, and they have done a phenomenal job keeping up with it. So if you go to fairtest.org, down here to the optional list, I'm already there. It'll give you every school in the country. You can actually sort it by state. It's pretty great. And you can see everybody that's test optional, okay? I will tell you probably one of the biggest announcements that we got just a couple weeks ago is that our state university, Rutgers University, New Brunswick, is gonna be test optional for another year for the class of 22. That was a big announcement. That's a big school for us. That's a school where we, oops, I don't want to do that. That's a big school where we send a lot of applicants and a lot of students. So we were excited to hear that information. So if Rutgers is on your radar, folks, and you're thinking about it, by all means, be excited because you don't have to submit test scores. Now, does that mean you don't take the test? Well, no, not necessarily, okay? So when students say to me, should I test? What do you think? I say to them, if you can comfortably test, if you're prepared to test, if you can safely test, keyword, safely take a test, then go ahead and test. I think that's sort of the response you're going to get from our whole counseling team. We want to be on the same page there. So the next SAT is March. Now in my testing video for juniors, I'm putting some upcoming times you can test. You know, if these tests happen, March, we've got a May, we've got a June, that's what's left in the school year for SAT. Then they bring the test back in August and October. There's lots of chances. ACT's got tests coming up in, I believe, February, April, June, July, September. So folks, there's opportunities coming up to test. And you might not know if your schools of interest are test optional for the class of 2022. So it's probably in your best interest to make a plan and think about when you're going to register for these tests. I have PSAT on there because that happened in the fall. Perhaps you've gotten your PSAT scores. Great tool to use to do some prep for the SAT. I'll just speak quickly to test prep. It's not something you need to invest a ton of financial resources in. If you have it and you want to, that's absolutely your choice. But Khan Academy, amazing partner with College Board, lots of free prep there. If you are disciplined students and can set aside some time every week, there's a lot of free resources out there for test prep. And we've got a couple local places that have tutors as well. We have our course at Central. So there's absolutely test prep options out there. We'd be happy to talk individually with families about that. But what I want to say about testing, if you can comfortably test, safely test, go ahead and test. You know, I think that I've had my own personal thoughts about College Board and ACT over the years and what those scores really mean in the college admissions process and the review. And I think the wake-up call hit a lot of schools over the last couple of months in realizing that they are not the end-all be-all. They are not that important in the admission process. In a perfect world, a lot of schools would move test optional indefinitely, but I think these tests still have a place somewhere out there. So we'll see what the next couple of months bring. Watch your schools policies, write to the college website or to Fair Test to get the most updated, accurate information. All right. I think this is my last slide before I turn it over to the counseling team for some other updates. So I'll talk a little bit about college visits. I think outside of standardized testing, this was probably one of the other big areas that took a hit. You know, campuses closed. I mean, there was no visiting last spring. It was restricted in the summer. We saw some kids getting out about in the fall, and now here we are in winter wondering, are campuses going to host visits? So here's what I can tell you. Get to the college websites to get the most accurate info. Get to the admissions page, click on visit or visit us or visitors, and you will get the most updated, accurate information about visits. I will say this, just because I'm in touch with admission colleagues almost every day between professional groups, many of them are my friends. I was on a Zoom earlier today with several of them. There are absolutely a good number of schools hosting visits right now. Now, what that means is you probably come with your family, maybe 1 or 2 other people, you're masked, you're social distancing. The tour is not going to be 50 people walking through campus. But there are opportunities to visit campuses. And I'm not talking about through a screen, because I know students, you're tired of doing that virtual programming through screens. So check your websites, okay? At Hunterdon Central, even through all this, we are continuing to give students 3 excuse days to visit college campuses. So what I mean by that, if you go on a college visit during a school day, whether you're hybrid or you're all virtual, you are missing your classes. We will excuse that. So you work with your house office secretary, it will be excused, but you've got to bring back a note on college letterhead, on a card. Think about going to the doctor and getting a school note. You need something from the college that proves you were there on that date, and you'll bring that back or you'll email it to your house secretary. So if you can work out visits on weekends or school breaks, spring recess and that, great. But we are supportive of you getting out there to visit campuses. So remember that. Now it's 3 days. If you don't use them junior year, they're gone, but you get 3 senior year. So it's not a carryover, but you get 3 excused visit days in junior year and senior year. If you're listening tonight with an underclassman, we don't give it to the 9th and 10th graders. We focus more on those that are closer to the process. If your schools aren't hosting visits, take advantage of the virtual stuff. I know you're tired of hearing about it. We're zoomed out, I get it, but I will tell you, my colleagues in admission have poured a lot of resources into virtual programming. I have seen and heard from our students, our seniors, about everything from, they're sitting at home and they're FaceTiming a student tour guide who's taking them around campus in real time or with a GoPro or some really great tool to make that student feel like they're there. So there's some really cool programming out there. But if you are able, safely, comfortably can get to some of your college campuses, we encourage it. We're going to have some things coming up in the spring. We are going to be participating in a virtual college fair. We are not going to leave you hanging, juniors. There'll be plenty of opportunities to engage, but there's nothing like getting on a campus. And I hope that you have that opportunity, maybe spring, summer, fall of next year, to safely and comfortably get on at least a couple of your top campuses, at least within the region. So we'll talk more about visits with you when we meet with you individually. I need to have a much needed water break. So I'm going to turn it over to Linda Kovacs, and then you're going to hear from Julie Blake and Jacqueline Devlin. They're going to take you through a couple slides. I'm going to check out some Q&A, and I'll be back with you guys shortly.
Okay, so believe it or not, we're ready for senior year scheduling. You will see that on the slide, there is a brief video that you will be able to access when this is posted. And we'll be sending out an email on Monday that will also contain the link. So it's an overview of the scheduling process. It's important to consider taking 4 years of all academic areas if appropriate, and we will be discussing the academic program with our students on an individual basis. Think about balance. We want our students to take challenging courses without creating undue stress. Have your child think about how they are feeling with their current workload. They should consider their responsibilities both in and out of school. Do they have jobs, home responsibilities such as caring for a younger sibling or an older relative? All of those things come into play when thinking about balance. Your child should check the admissions requirements of some of the colleges in which they have expressed interest. It's a good way to help them gauge the types of courses they should be considering for senior year. For us, the scheduling window for the rising seniors is February 2nd through 6th. Please select courses during this window so that you have the greatest opportunity to get the classes you desire. We will be sending out an email on Monday with how-to links, as well as the program of studies and graduation requirements. Finally, we will meet with every student as we have done in the past to review their choices and discuss options. These meetings will happen between February and March. We will still be meeting to make changes during that time and go over the 4-year plan, and graduation requirements will be reviewed. I think Julie's up.
Sorry, it takes me a minute to get back together, and I want to let everybody know I'm really enjoying answering these questions and answers. You guys are asking amazing questions. Letters of recommendation. This is an important part for all of you to understand. We, as your counselors, will be writing you a letter if you are applying to a 4-year school, and that's required. There are some schools, if you were only applying to Rutgers and you know you're going there, we don't recommend that you only apply to one, but they don't require letters of recommendation. We will ask from you for some information, which I'm going to mention and talk about in a moment, but we will talk about you holistically, meaning we're going to talk about you, how you've grown, what you're interested in, and all the things that you have shared with us over the years, and including in this feedback form that I'm going to go through in a moment. These are the things that we're going to talk about. So contextualizing you in terms of your class, the school, and where that goes. Next week, you're going to be have access to this junior student and parent questionnaire. And I'd like for you to take a look. It says it's going to be a shared document. You first must make a copy of the document so that you can make edits, and then add your name to the end of the document name. If you could do last name first, it's easier for me to find. I'm not going to speak for my other the other counselors. But one thing that we would like you to do is to complete the whole document and then share it with us after you're done. If you're only halfway done, I don't want to start writing your letter with only in an incomplete form. All right, so if you can scroll down, Mrs. Nectarline, you can see right here, the first part of it is going to be the student part, and it's going to be a series of questions that are going to fill in the gaps for things that we don't know about you. And if you, I'll go slow here. You're going to see that there's going to be, asking for adjectives and for you to explain. The parent portion of it as well is going to have some of the same questions. There will be a place if you were negatively affected by COVID, and I think all of us can say that we were, but that if it has impacted your learning or your performance, please let us know. All right, and that question is there, is 11 for the students. This is the parent portion. And parents, we really use what you say to us. I really cannot overstate how valuable your insight on your child is to us, because we really, we don't know what was going on with them at home or how passionate they were about, the Rubik's Cube. And we may never know that, and they may not think that that's important, but that's a fun, interesting thing to, kind of contextualize your child about. Activities inside and out, outside of school, babysitting, everything. We know this is COVID and everybody's going to be kind of limited in what they can do. So you don't have to go crazy and you don't have to feel bad. You may not have but a few things that you've done. Then the last page is a waiver form. And we do expect we won't write a letter without a waiver. And the reason we do that is for your benefit. Colleges will not use our letters if we don't have this waiver, because it means that you had the right to see it. So what we really want to do is emphasize, are only going to say wonderful things about you. And we are only going to say that, what will add to your application. But if you don't allow us to have that as a private communication between the colleges, they will disregard it. So we don't want that. So Teachers, the teacher recommendations. Who do you choose? And going back a little bit. Get back one slide, Mrs. Nectarline. The teachers, who do you choose, how many, and when do you ask? You should ask a teacher in a class that you feel really, it can be lots of different reasons. You think you're performing really well. You have a relationship with that teacher and you've been, interacting. You've been an asset to the class. You love the subject. It can be, if you're applying to a particular program, for example, art, you might want to ask your art teacher. If you're applying for engineering, we recommend a math and a science. And you need to have one of those teachers who are in that subject matter. So teachers who teach under the science category. And even though you want to be an engineer, a letter from the engineering department will not be the same meaning, and not the same meaning as a physics teacher. So we will have that conversation if you have questions about who you should ask. That makes sense that you would have those questions. A standard, if you don't know what you want to major in, is one writing intensive class, social studies, English, and then one science or math. Sometimes people are all just social studies, and that's okay too. When do you ask? You can ask right now. And the way it looks right now is they're not going to write your letter right now, but what you're doing is you're letting them know that you love the class. It can happen at the end of this year as well, but you're going to ask them if they would be willing to write you a letter in the fall. You, when you apply in the fall, will indicate through Naviance that you're ready for the letters, and that's when they submit their letters and write them. So if you can ask them in person, that's the ideal. Many of you, many of you are virtual, so that's impossible. So this would be the year that you can. This is the only time. In real life, you wouldn't do this. You would want to go in person. If you can't, write a nice email saying, I've really enjoyed your class. I really would love if you would be able to write me a letter of recommendation in the fall. If you do it in person, please follow up with an email because you want to confirm with them that you've made this arrangement. Do not be offended if they say no. Sometimes they have limits, sometimes they have other responsibilities, and they can't do it. But that's generally how it goes. And each college will have different recommendation requirements or thoughts, so you're going to have, you're going to be keeping track of that as we go along. It is okay for you to ask teachers from your senior year. Let's say you want to be an engineer and you're taking physics senior year. It might make sense for you to wait and ask that teacher that year. Most of your recommenders should be probably junior year. And sometimes I get questions of, can I ask it? I had a really great relationship with my freshman year English teacher. We're never going to say no, but I'm going to tell you that how you wrote as a 9th grader is going to be very different from how you wrote as an 11th grader or 12th grader. And it would probably serve you better to have somebody who's seen your recent work when you're closer to college attendance. And if you think about it, it makes sense. You may have had a great relationship with somebody in 9th grade, but you're not that learner. You're not 14 and going to college. You are going to be 17 and 18. Next slide, please. College essay. This is a great topic, and I just can't overstate how much fun this is. You have to imagine that this year of all years, how you write and your recommendations may matter a lot, considering you may not have test scores to send, or they may not be looking at their test scores at all. So one of the things that we really want you to be thinking about is, how do you write the essay and what should it be? Many of you will be doing it in your classes, your English classes. Some of you will not. One of the things I want you to think about, or we all want you to think about, is your audience. Who will be reading these essays? And the people who will be reading these essays could be a 23-year-old right out of college who's working in admissions, or it could be a 70-year-old who has been working in admissions their entire career or did it previously. Is a huge range of what you might see. So it's really important that if you keep your audience in mind, meaning a general audience, you will tailor it to a general audience. You don't know who's going to be reading it on the other end. And I can tell you some tips right now that one of the most important parts is being respectful and being courteous to your reader, and don't assume that they know who you are or what you are. The essay is about you, and the way it's about you is that you're showing somebody how you think. There is no topic that really is off limits, but you want to remember you have never met this person before and they don't know the full context of you. So you want to make sure that you're thinking in terms of, this is their first introduction to me and I want to show them how I think. So that allows for a lot of creativity and a lot of fun, but it doesn't allow for a big range of, you want to be respectful. We do suggest that you have it read by many, many people, because that's the expectation on the other end, that is grammatically correct. There are many colleges that may ask for supplemental essays. Those you can find out in advance. They may change in the fall, but you can get a sense of how much they ask, if it's 6 short answers or if it's another essay. We found this year, I let Mrs. Nectarline speak about it later, but I believe that there are some schools that are asking for a little bit more writing if you don't send your tests. I think I have covered it all. All right, thank you. And Ms. Devlin's next.
Hey, good evening. So I'm going to talk a little bit about extracurricular activities. So since freshman year, we've really been encouraging, our students to get involved. And that includes so many different things, sports, performing arts, clubs, the things they can do in school, and of course, all the things that they're involved in outside of school as well. That's holding a job, any volunteer opportunity, maybe a religious organization that they're involved in. These things are so important because colleges want to have students on their campus that are going to be actively involved. So a college's application is going to give each student an opportunity to highlight how they spent their time outside of school. Everything that they do outside of school hours can really be highlighted. If you haven't done so yet, you should start tracking and recording things like your activities and the things you've been involved in. As a tip, Naviance has a great resume builder tool you can utilize. Getting organized now will really just save time and effort in the fall when you have to record and highlight those extracurricular activities on your college applications. Don't undervalue things you're doing outside of school. Caring for a family member or sibling, babysitting, all are activities that show responsibility, time management, organization. So make sure to include those on your application. Colleges recognize that COVID has definitely had an impact on activities. Colleges understand that. They know students may not have had as many opportunities to be involved this year as they have freshman and sophomore year. So try not to stress out too much about lack of involvement this year. Okay, next slide, please. So performing arts, for music, art, or design programs, students may have to showcase their work by auditioning on campus, or it could be virtually, or submitting an audio tape, slides, portfolio, or some other sample of work to demonstrate ability. If you're out there and you're thinking about performing arts, make sure to find out about any extra requirements, and definitely take note of dates for submitting your portfolio, auditioning, etc. These dates are often different from the application deadline date. So now I'm going to turn it back over to Ms. Nectarline.
Okay, well, I'm back. I'm going to move my slide down here and pray that our technology still works. Thank you guys so much. We're just past visual performing arts. All right, back on track. Mrs. Blake brought up one thing. I jotted it down. She had asked about additional writing pieces if a school goes test optional. So that was kind of interesting over the last couple months to see that without scores, what schools opted to ask for in place of it. So we did see schools asking for possibly an additional essay or a supplement, something like that. Not every school, but again, folks, this is checking your college websites, seeing what the requirements are if scores are not required. All right, I'm going to move on. Oh, I didn't do athletics. Really, just a brief overview here, only because we tend to work really closely with our athletes in making sure that they're all registered. This is going to be with your grade level counselor. So let me just speak a little bit to our athletes. Make sure that you register with the NCAA Eligibility Center, no matter what division. And the reason I say that is because Division 1 and 2 must register with the NCAA Eligibility Center, but Division 3 folks out there, and the luxuries of being at home with children. Hopefully you didn't hear my kids making their way to their evening routine. I do apologize. But sometimes Division III athletes are thinking about going D1 or 2. Things can change in the process. So we tell every student, no matter what, if you're a prospective student athlete, register with the NCAA Eligibility Center. Your grade level counselor can certainly direct you and help you there. If you are thinking about playing sports in college, make sure you're filling out those prospective student athlete questionnaires. You'll find those on college websites. If you go to the athletics site, it'll say, you know, want to be recruited or prospective athlete, fill this out. And it's going to be a form about your sport. It might ask for some data if you're like a swimmer or runner, things like that. It may ask for a link to video if you're someone who's got more video highlights in your sport, like a football or lacrosse, something like that. So athletes, you can start filling those out. It puts you in the database to be recruited, to be considered, to be looked at, tells the school you're interested. And then lastly, you'll want to work with your counselor on making sure your courses are NCAA approved. And there is an approved list on their website. But again, make sure, speak up, juniors, if you are interested in playing sports at the collegiate level, that your counselor is aware, no matter the level, that they are aware. All right, let me talk a little bit about admission plans. It seems kind of strange to be talking about different ways to apply to college as a junior, but the reason I do this in this presentation is because I want you to go into the next couple months listening to college presentations and knowing what these terms mean and not being confused on them, because they're really important. There's a couple different ways to apply to college, and they're all kind of centered around different deadline dates, if you will. And some of these terms may look familiar. If you're a parent listening and you've been through this with your children, or you have brothers or sisters, or you just listen to our seniors chat about schools, there's a couple different ways to apply to college. Traditional regular decision, that's going to be one hard deadline date, usually in the winter. So we've kind of come past those, you know, January 1st, January 15th, then maybe February 1st. That's when your application in full is due. And basically colleges are in reading season right now for regular decision. So that's what, if you're like myself or my colleagues or parents listening that went to college, there was like one deadline when we applied. There weren't all these other different ways and different deadlines to apply. We were used to applications being due sometime a couple months into our senior year, but the process has moved a little bit. So you will likely have schools on your list that take regular decision, one hard deadline date, usually in the winter, no binding commitments. You just find out usually by the end of March. Rolling admission is, think of a rolling ball. So as applications come in, decisions go out. What that means is that there is no hard deadline. It might actually be listed as something like July. So end of the year means that's when they'll stop reading applications. But rolling admission means the sooner you apply, the sooner you get a decision. So once that school has a complete application from you with all the appropriate credentials, which you'll get transcripts, letters of rec, all that from the high school when school resumes in the fall, we'll send it out. You may have a complete application at a rolling admission school by the end of September. That's very possible. And you'll have a decision within maybe 2 weeks. So that's why it's not uncommon for us to be about a month and a half into senior year and having seniors already hearing back from rolling admission schools. But keep in mind, as they get those applications and make those decisions are going out, spots are being filled. So you don't want to wait on those and wait too long. Now let me get into the early plans. Early decision and early action definitely have become much more popular. I mean, I can think back to starting at Central 13 years ago, and we had handfuls of students doing this, but it has really exploded over the last 10 years or so. So let me start with early action. First of all, both have early deadlines. So what I mean by that is typically somewhere around November 1st. There's a tiny handful of schools whose early deadline is October 15th, very tiny, but most are November 1st and November 15th. Early action, you can apply to a school early action by, let's say, November 1, and you should have a decision back, ideally in the middle of December, possibly into January. Okay, great. So that's pretty much it. There's no tremendous advantage in doing early action because so many students do it. You basically get back to school in September, you get your act together, you get your applications in, we give you all the tools, resources you need to do it, and you get them submitted by November 1 to the schools that have early action, and you have results back pretty soon. So you kind of go into either your holiday season or the second half of your senior year with a couple results already. You could be admitted, which is great, and you still have many months after that to decide. You could be rejected, or you could be deferred, which means early action review. school wasn't quite ready to make a decision on you. Maybe they want to see your senior year grades. Maybe they need more time. They'll move you to the regular decision pool. Okay, so we have many seniors right now who are in the deferral place, and that's totally normal. Okay, and we have a lot of suggestions, some actions we can take during that time to help our seniors out in showing interest and things like that. So it is not uncommon for a student to have half or even more than half of their list have early action and to do early action. And then it's like November and most of your applications are submitted, which isn't a terrible thing either. Okay, makes for a busy start, but it's nice to have those lifted off your plate. Then there's early decision. And I bet there's probably a junior listening tonight who's thinking early decision because you have found the school that you love. It's not uncommon for that to happen in your junior year. You found a school you love. They offer early decision. Early decision is an early deadline, like a November 1st. You file the application and you don't file any other early decision applications. Remember, with early action, you could do a couple to whoever has it. And I'll talk about that last bullet in a minute about early action, but early action you could do to a couple schools. Early decision's one, because if you are admitted to that school, you are signing a binding contract agreement. You, your counselor, and your parents are signing an ED agreement stating that if admitted, you will attend. Okay, so that school is reading early decision students, knowing that if they admit them, those students are enrolling in their institution. Okay, so 100% yield, we call it. Yield is the percent of students who are admitted that actually attend the school. And for the most part, ED is 100% yield. They know you're coming, they have you, okay? They know you're filling a class spot, they know you're filling a bed in the dorms, you're coming to their institution. So in some cases, early decision admit rates are a little bit higher than the overall regular decision admit rate. And this is especially true at your very selective schools. So it's not uncommon for our pool of early decision applicants every year in senior year to be mostly schools that are pretty selective. Now, selectivity, remember, that's different for everybody. So a student might be applying ED to a school that's very different from their classmate, but that's their reach. And for another student, that's their reach. ED, it varies, but we often see most of our ED applicants, and it usually hovers between about 50 to 70 seniors a year filing the one ED application, usually to pretty selective schools. And like early action, they're getting their results back usually by the end of December. They could be admitted and the process is over. They're enrolling, they're going. They could be deferred and moved to regular decision, which means the binding commitment is over. They can now apply to other schools. They could apply early decision round 2 to a school that has it, but they are no longer binding to that school because that school's deferred them to regular, or they could be denied ED and the process is over. So there is a lot to unpack with these, a lot of ED conversations. I will say we want to talk to students considering early decision. Talk to your counselor or talk to me, because that's a huge decision. It's a big deal for a 17-year-old to say, I'm ready to make a commitment to one college, but it actually can be the really the best plan for some students. So please be vocal with us. Let us know what you're thinking. Single choice or restrictive early action, I'll give you 2 examples, Harvard and Princeton. If you want to find out what it means, go to their websites. These are schools that have early action, but they throw this R word in front, restrictive. So applying restrictive early action to a school like Princeton or Harvard means you're applying early action. So by November 1, you are restricted though, okay, in that you cannot file any other early action applications to any other private institution. So you could put an early action application into Rutgers, public school, University of Michigan, public school, but they're restricting you and they only want you to apply to their institution early action, so it's restrictive. If you get in, you're not binded. It's not a binding commitment. It's not early decision, but the restriction is that they ask you only apply to their school early action. We can certainly talk about that extensively with students on whether or not that's the right choice. I can probably count on one hand how many schools in the country have restrictive early action. So just keep that in mind. Not terribly popular, but I mentioned those 2 names because most of us have heard of them and they might be on the radar for some of you. So those are different admission plans. We will talk about those extensively as we move into senior year. Okay, I've talked a lot about college, and I told you at the beginning, we have about 70% of our students pursuing 4-year college. And when you're talking about classes of over 650 students, that still leaves a lot of students who are not going away to college. I imagine a good number of you listening tonight are probably in that group that are thinking about college, but also want to know other options. I mean, I think it's safe to say, as we learned over the last almost 11 months that our world can change drastically and pretty quickly. Like our class of 2020, some of them went from four-year college to community college to, I'm just going to work because I got to figure out what the next year or 2 or 3 of my life is going to look like. So we want to at least present these options to you. Community college, Raritan Valley Community College, right here. It's our home community college, although it's located in Somerset. We're sharing that fantastic community college with Somerset County. It's a fantastic place, folks. We have about 125, give or take, seniors that pursue that every year. Some will go a semester, some will spend 2.5 years there and earn the full associates and transfer on successfully to many four-year schools all over the country. We keep in touch with a lot of those kids. We have a lot of our really strong seniors that are going into the RVCC Honors College, which is an exceptional opportunity. It's a really robust community college. There's fantastic opportunities, and it became the option for many of our students who never considered it last year, but all of a sudden this was the best option for me, for my family, for my safety. I'm going to do a year at RVCC, and they're thriving. We were in touch with them, and they're thriving. So that's about 20% of our class every year. Some students will take a gap year off, kind of figure things out. They might work during that time. Maybe they'll travel, probably not so much in the last year, but they might do a volunteer program. But we can get you acquainted with different gap year programs if you'd like. Prep school, we don't see a lot of that. Maybe 1 or 2 of our students a year. Tends to be a little bit more popular with our athletes who may be getting some encouragement from college coaches. Hey, go take a PG, a post-grad year, get yourself in some better shape, build up some muscle, work on your academics. Here's a couple prep schools we suggest. So tends to be more of an athletic situation, but if it's something you're thinking about and want to talk about, let us know. Military, we've been hosting military recruiters over the last couple of months. We're going to do another round of that in February and then through the spring. We have about 10 to 15 students a year enlist in all the different branches of the military. We'd be more than happy to get you acquainted with local recruiting officers. A lot of them are based in Somerville, but we can get you acquainted, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard. We can talk to you about National Guard. If you want to talk about service academies like West Point, Naval Academy, Air Force Academy, that's going to be more the four-year college route, and we'll talk about that with students that are interested. Same goes for ROTC programs, if you want to talk about that. When I say military on this slide, I'm talking about enlisting in the military out of high school. And again, we can absolutely get you connected with recruiters to discuss. And then lastly, employment. We have a good number of students who leave Hunterdon Central and go right into the workforce. And we'd be happy to help you with resume building, cover letters, making cold calls, applying for jobs. You know, it's a big high school. We have a lot of connections in the community. Maybe for you, it's your high school part-time job becomes a full-time job, whatever the case might be. Maybe you're picking 2 things from this list, doing RVCC and working at the same time as you figure out your plans after high school. So there are several options. It does not have to be college, and maybe you plan for more than one, and that's perfectly fine too. We've got resources coming into senior year for all of these. So please be vocal with your counselor. Let them know what you're thinking. All right, couple things on financial aid and scholarships. We save a lot of this for senior year because that's when you apply for aid, but I will highlight a couple things, some dates for now. So financial aid comes in a couple different forms. I will say aid in general comes in a couple different forms. Financial aid, usually when we say financial aid, we're referring to need-based aid. So that's going to be money that the family qualifies for based on financial needs. So after an application like the FAFSA, F-A-F-S-A, the free application for federal student aid, after completing that and sharing your income, your assets, and all of your financial information for the family and the student, if they work, that is all going to be processed by colleges and universities next year. And from there, they'll determine your eligibility for need. So need could be need from the government. It could be need from the institution. They could come up with loan packages, grant packages. There's lots of different types of need. Then there's what we call merit-based aid. So there's financial aid, which is usually need-based. I mean, financial aid is the overall term, but there's need-based aid based on your need. And then there's merit aid, which is your scholarships. I would also probably cluster athletic money in there. If you're a D1 or D2 athlete and you're receiving money for your athletic talent, that would sort of be bundled into merit because you don't pay that back. So scholarships you don't pay back, and athletic aid, grants you don't pay back. Loans you pay back, okay? So just to break down those different terms, you will apply, so juniors, class of 2022, you will begin applying for financial aid on October 1st, 2021. So there's nothing to do now. You haven't missed anything, you're not behind. So once we get into senior year, we will host a financial aid night. We bring a fantastic speaker in, and we brought her in virtually this year. Her presentation's on our website if you want to visit our school website and check it out. She's a financial university officer from Monmouth. She's been working with us for as long as I've been at Central, and she knows her stuff. We are not financial aid experts. Financial aid is a completely separate field and expertise area and professional job, different from school counseling. So while counselors can answer very, very basic questions about financial aid, direct you to things, your actual meaty questions about financial aid and all the intricacies of it will be left for the financial aid office at colleges. So you start, the FAFSA will open up October 1st, 2021. You will be filing a FAFSA for what will be your child's freshman year of college. So 2022, 2023, those are crazy dates to say. That's the FAFSA you'll file. So you can't do anything till October 1 of this year. And at that time, your FAFSA will be based on the 2020 year. So what we just finished. So as your documents are starting to roll in right now and you're completing everything, getting everything ready this spring for the 2020 year, hold on to it. Keep it in a safe place. Keep your eyes on that stuff because you'll need it for the FAFSA this fall. We have some resources on our school website. From the homepage, if you click counseling and then college and career, there's links on financial aid info. There's links on scholarship info. We talk a lot more about scholarships, that money that everybody wants because it's free money and you don't pay it back. We talk a lot more about that in senior year. So stay tuned for that. We run a very robust local scholarship program that'll happen in February of the senior year. I'm just coming up on that right now with our seniors. We put out lots of different search engines for you to find scholarships. So that's all coming next year. Don't go applying, juniors, for anything now. There may be a couple scholarships out there lingering for juniors, but it's really focused right now on our current seniors. So we'll have a lot more coming next year about that. All right, I put this slide up. Time-wise, it's really good. I'm looking at my clock here. We're about 10 minutes till our end. Just want to put this slide back up. I brought this slide up at the very beginning, our goals for this year. I tried to touch on everything here with some depth, just to bring us back to that's a lot of information we've given you tonight, and we give it to you quickly because we're cognizant of your time, but I want to be mindful of this slide because if you look at this slide, we've touched on these things. These are fairly doable and manageable things for students, for families to work on with their students, but let your students do the work. Please put them in the driver's seat of their college process, but it's manageable and it's doable. And if you meet with me or your counselor, we'll go over all of these things with you, okay? All right, what's next? I said at the beginning, everything we've talked about tonight is going to be turned into a mini video, couple minutes each, on lists, on testing, on visits, on how to stay organized. We've got about 15 different videos coming out to juniors next week. Some of them we may edit along the way because things are changing, but we want you to kind of treat it like a library. So it's going to come out in a Google Doc sent to all juniors, and we'll get it out to parents and on the website. And it's just going to have the videos listed. A couple other resources will be on that document, but we want you to click on the videos. No specific order, just check them out, see what we have to say. It's mostly me talking about college, taking all these topics and breaking them apart even more. What's going to happen after we get settled into semester 2? So in February, I am going to be hosting with our counselors at least once a week, some type of Zoom room, if you will, okay? This is taking the place of what we normally would have done pre-COVID, which is when we packed students in the little theater in big groups and we talked college, okay? We're going to make something available to our juniors every week. It's going to be very timed. Sometimes it'll be during, the school day, and maybe it works with your study hall. Sometimes it'll be over lunch. On Wednesdays, it might be at a different time because it's a full day. It might be after school. Maybe I'll throw an evening in once in a while. And we're going to open up Zoom for you to come in and do Q&A with us. What's on your mind? What are you thinking? What questions do you have? Some weeks we'll theme it to, like, this week's all about essays. So come talk to us for 30 minutes about essay writing. Come talk to us about college lists. The virtual fair is coming up. Here's some tips on it. But we want to make sure that at least once a week, you have an opportunity to, number one, see each other. And yes, you'll have to have video on because I like to Zoom with students with video on. I want to see your faces if you're able. But we want you to interact. We want you to hear each other's questions because we know we can't all all be together. We want to hear what questions you have. So stay tuned for our weekly Zooming, okay? We're going to do some virtual events this semester. We're going to participate in a virtual college fair that's opened up to all of New Jersey, lots of different schools. We're going to bring in some of our admission friends to do a virtual panel, likely an evening event. Stay tuned on that. And then we're going to just get a couple of our schools, our admission reps from our schools where we do a lot of volume, to come in and do some virtual visiting with you. Lastly, meetings. We are coming up on scheduling. So you heard Ms. Kovacs talk about scheduling. You will all get a scheduling meeting. Be patient. It takes time for them to get through everybody through February and March. But I am also here to meet with you. And so I started getting meeting requests from juniors in December. I've met with a couple juniors. It's been a pleasure. It's a nice different shift and break from our seniors who are in it right now. I love the planning. I love getting going with you. But I'm meeting with students who have some plans underway. We're not start doing cold turkey. We have given you so many resources. We're giving you all these videos. We want you to do some work, some homework first. So if you request a meeting with me, and this is just for me because I serve the whole student body, I'm going to come back at you with a couple questions. I want to know you got some schools in mind, that you have some criteria in place, that you've done some groundwork, and then we'll take it from there. All right. And we're doing pretty much everything through Zoom. So that's what I've got. That's the end of that slide, Q&A. So I'm going to go ahead, stop share, folks. We're going to hang out with you till about 8. I'll see if there's anything in the Q&A. If you are, oh my gosh, there's still so many people, over 200 of you. Thank you for hanging out with us tonight. It means a lot. But here's what we're going to do. I'm going to check out my Q&A and see if there's anything going. Oh, they just disappeared. I think it might be, there's nothing in there, but folks, I'll hang out for a moment. And if there's any questions that you have, this is a really good time to ask them. I hope that you found tonight valuable. Again, we're recording, so we can, we'll put this out on our website. We'll run this tonight, hopefully get it posted, like at least for the students on the homepage of Naviance tomorrow. I'll send it off to the webmaster. We'll get it on our website. I'm looking, gosh, you guys all did an amazing job. There's a lot of questions in here and it looks awesome. So if no questions, last chance, type fast. Post my email address. So I will go ahead and we're all on the school website. Okay. So if you go to Hunterdon Central's website, on the home page, there's a link to counseling. You go counseling and then college and career, and you'll find us. So you'll find my email address. So we're all posted right on the Central website. And if I can manage to do more than one thing at a time, I can type it in. I think it disappeared. Thank you. Yes, you're so welcome. Okay, I see a couple questions touch on the interview process. College interviews. I mean, prior to COVID, it was a handful of schools that wanted an interview. And usually they're meeting a student like in a local coffee shop, or they're doing it on like Skype. Remember that thing, Skype, before Zoom became, the norm. I tell students that are going on an interview, you're going to talk to someone. You're not being asked crazy questions. It's not question, answer, question, answer. You shouldn't be intimidated. You are going to talk to an adult who happens to work in admissions, who wants to get to know you. And that's how you should approach it. A conversation with an adult. Be prepared to talk about yourself, something that may be a little uncomfortable for students. This is why we prep you. Be prepared to talk about your academics, you as a person, you as a friend, your activities. But think about it as a conversation, not this intense experience that they're going to grill you with really tough questions and send it all back to the admission office if they're an alumni interviewing or whatever. It really is just conversational, a getting to know you process. So that's how I like to approach interviews with our students. Suggested courses for senior year before scheduling. I'll turn that over to one of you guys.
I'll take it. And I was just answering it, and we have worked with your children with four-year plans. And so if your child can't find the four-year plan, it's a spreadsheet. All of mine begin with the child's last name that was shared by me. And all of those were thought out with where your child was the last time we did this. We made adjustments. That being said, you should be looking at those four-year plans and teacher recommendations, and consider also, your child is also going to be applying to college. When we talk about your four-year plan, that's always a consideration, that there's a small part-time job going on the fall of senior year. And then second semester senior year, please remember that even the most diligent of students get a bit of senioritis. So don't load up on everything. 5 academic units is a good rough model that colleges are looking for. If your child has completely radically changed what they're interested in, that might be a good time for them to email any one of us about what classes might be appropriate for this change. If it's been consistent all 4 years, what's in the 4-year plan should be pretty consistent with what they should be taking.
Just going through the rest as we close out here, the FAFSA is not completed until after October 1st. That's correct. Now, of course, if you have older children in college now, you're working on it for them. But for the class of 22, their FAFSA does not open up till October 1st of 21. So come this October 1st of 2021, your child graduating in June of 22 will go to college in August of 22. So you are going to be filing this October 1st, the FAFSA for the 2022-2023 school year, your child's freshman year. We'll remind you of all that this fall, but yes, there's nothing to fill out prior to October 1 of your child's senior year. I answered that. You're so welcome. Thank you for coming. Should students looking at programs that require auditions and pre-screenings apply for more than the average? Well, I will say pre-COVID and now, students applying to visual and performing arts schools have almost always been a little above the average. So the 10 to 12 range, give or take, but because of the process of applying visual and performing arts is admissions and the art department. I mean, there's 2 departments looking at you. So yeah, in that case, your list is going to be expanded out a little bit. There's unknown selectivity across both departments. You could be an exceptional artist and a mediocre student, or vice versa. One department wants you and one says not going to work. So we do tend to see our visual performing arts students have a little bit of a longer list, but we'd love to work a little closer with those students and make sure that we're on the right track list-wise. I'm going to go.
You're pausing for 1 second. I just want to mention that you can't fill out the FAFSA before October 1st, but there is a net cost calculator on every college website that's going to do that model. Did you say that earlier?
No, beautiful, Julie. Thank you for mentioning that. Yeah.
Okay, so you can go on to a school's website, you can fill it out, and you can get a sense of what your estimated family contribution will be, though I think that's changed this year, right? It's no longer going to be an EFC, it's going to be a different model.
Yeah.
And so I can't even speak to that.
We'll release that senior year. Is the FAFSA required for most schools? Yes, that is the main financial form. But I want to jump up and take this last one, and then we're going to break for the night. We signed my son to take the SAT in March. Considering the changes, do you think he should still take it with the essay? No. How could I leave out subject test and SAT with essay changes that just came up in the last few days? Folks, the SAT with essay, the essay is going away and subject tests are going away. But because I want you to read it. So jump on College Board's website, read the language. It just came out recently, but subject tests, hallelujah, are finally going away. I just thought their days were coming to an end anyway. And the essay, the person that asked that about the March test, I want you to jump on College Board just to double check, because SAT, the essay portion is going away. So just double check all the language on College Board. Email me tomorrow. Or call me and we'll talk about it. All right, folks, thank you so much. This was an incredible audience. We are so grateful for you. We cannot wait to kick things off with this. Well, these guys have already kicked it off with the class, but I'm really looking forward to working with you, juniors. So be in touch and enjoy the rest of your night. Thanks, everybody.